Vijay Drakoi. I will speak now.
Ah, traveler. Come in, come in. It's a wet day out there, as I'm sure you're quite well aware. Come in and get out of the rain for a time. Oh, never mind about the rugs. They've been put down for just such a day as this, and they've seen many and many a muddy track and been none the worse for it. Believe me, I have stories about mud that would make your skin crawl. And if you stay in here too long, on a rainy day like this, you run a very serious risk of hearing a story or two. But let us first get some warmth into you before I begin to regale you with tales of mud and water. If you will hang your wet cloak up right over here, and seat yourself in yonder corner, next to the charcoal brazier. It is hardly a blazing bonfire, but it should soon get some heat onto your damp clothes and into your skin. Meanwhile, I'm going to prepare the makings of a strong stimulant drink and warm that over the fire as well. You'll want to have something warm in you while you're drying out. It's one of the best ways I know of to fight the damp. Tell me, what business takes you abroad on this dreary, damp day, traveler? Well, if you're looking for the captain of the town guard, you'll not find her out and about in this weather. She tends to stay at the watch barracks whenever it gets cold or wet out, though, considering her age, I don't really blame her. Old war wounds tend to ache in weather like this. Might I inquire as to your business with her? Assuming it's nothing private or confidential, that is. A formal position within the guard. How exciting. Are you thinking of setting down roots here, then? I see. A temporary engagement for now. Well, at least it's a steady flow of coin. Some of the townsfolk do grumble about the guard for minor reasons betimes, but I have never heard it said that they've gone without their pay. I can tell you that you'll be spending a lot of your duty hours standing out in weather like this, however. The town guard does not take its responsibilities lightly. They'll make their rounds come wind or high water. Rather like the couriers of the Order of Our Lady of Perpetual Motion, in fact, but limiting themselves to the vicinity of the town. You might want to give some thought to joining the Order, in fact, if ever your thirst for the adventurous life begins to wane. There's still plenty of travel, many sights to see, and you'll always be on the move. Just something to consider. Are you beginning to dry out yet? To warm up? I've nearly finished with this drink. Here. Let it cool a moment, and merely take in the warmth of the mug through your hands. And drink it slowly. It will warm you better that way. Now, I deem this rain will last for some time yet, and you'll be some time yourself in warming and drying yourself, not to mention your cloak. And so, I invite you to remain in here, at least for a while, rather than trudging about in the rain and mud. I shall tell you a story or two, to pass the time. Ah, what luck. The hookah is still aglow. Let me see. What stories are best for this rainy day? There are so many to choose from. I've been to many a market town in all kinds of weather. But the mud sometimes is the absolute worst thing to endure. In one particularly muddy marketplace, I saw a man go from boots to bare feet in only 4 sticky steps. It was a most insidious, clinging, grasping sort of mud, and the man was obviously not used to moving in such. And so the mud stripped him of his footgear entire. Left boot, left sock, right sock, in as many steps, and he was obliged to continue on his slippery way with the mud grasping eagerly at his bare feet. I prefer not to go about in such muck. I paid good money for these boots, and do not wish to lose them. Then there was another market town, where the market green stands just below the town, and all the rainwater drains from the streets down through the green. In that market, I once watched a slow, steady flow of mud as it oozed down from the town proper, and gradually took over the entire merchant quarter. The grass had been close cropped by the sheep just a day or two before, and was as even and green as you like. But by the end of the day, the mud flow had buried everything, and all the merchants and shopping folk were up to their ankles in a thin, almost liquid mire. Very unpleasant. There is a class of people, traveler, that I occasionally encounter in the market towns of a rainy day, that I choose to call the mud people. They come from many walks of life, traveling mercenaries, migrating herdsfolk, itinerant laborers, etc. Generally not of the richer sort. The gentry and nobility do not tend to go about in such weather as this. The mud people generally show up the morning after a heavy rain. I often see them trudging and tramping about the marketplace, looking in at the various tents and stalls to see what is on offer. And often I have observed them peering curiously into my own tent, seeing the many interesting wares, and then looking down and seeing the carpets. Understand, traveler, that these mud people are often clad in their last clean set of clothing. Not dry clothing. Such is their luck and the severity of the weather accompanying them that nothing they own in this world is dry anymore. But at least they still possess at least one set of clothing that is not thoroughly saturated with mud. They are often barefoot, their footwear having usually been left behind in their encampment, slowly turning into stone as the mud encrusted on it dries. Though, looking at them, one could hardly tell whether their feet were shod or not, so thickly are their legs coated with mud, from toes to knees. And they are aware of all this mud, you see. So when they look in here and see my nice dry carpets, they grow hesitant. I see all of this, of course, and I invite them to come in. They hesitate further and usually voice some sentiment about not wishing to dirty the floors of such a fine mercantile establishment. I tell them not to worry, to come in and see the things. And when they step into the shop, putting a single foot inside, they invariably look to me again just to see if they have somehow been tricked. I pretend not to see this, and bid them examine what wares I have to offer. And after a short interval, they forget their mud-caked condition and settle down to a serious inspection of my wares. Some time later, they leave, Perhaps they have made a purchase, perhaps not. Perhaps they will return later, perhaps not. But in every case, this thing occurs. They leave my shop with their legs just as atrociously muddy as when they came in, but my carpets are cleaner. You see, traveler, though they appear fairly clean, my carpets are so often trod upon by a steady flow of customers that there is almost always dry dust in them, and often other fine debris as well. And this dry layer adheres to the feet of the mud people, forming a shell around the outside of their muddy troll feet. This prevents them getting their mud on my carpets, and indeed helps in tracking all that dirt and dust back out of my shop again. Yes, indeed. Sometimes the mud in these market towns can become quite the impediment. And in some lands, I have heard, the mud has at times been so utterly pervasive as to find its way into the local folklore and legendary. For example, in the oral traditions of the Dagorhir, a people very dear to my heart and with whom I often travel and camp, there is a story told of one particular summer where their princess was driven mad by all of the mud. Should you like to hear this story? Very well, then. I shall tell the tale, and for added dramatic effect, I shall use a bit of magic to bring forth a voice more fitting for the recitation.
Mia voce faregu kiel sia voce.
I am the princess of my people. I am the daughter of the old Khan, whose beard is long and gray with years. I guide my people through the lands we travel. I guide them through hills and valleys and over rivers, as our horde passes to and fro across the lands. My people were happy and safe and had many tents and fair things and good food to eat and fine clothing on their backs and well-made shoes. And the lands we traveled were green and lush. The people would go about their appointed work by day and sit near the fires at night and drink and sing. But all of that is gone now, washed away with the rain and buried under mud. The tents are wet and the mud has gotten into everything we have, and I cannot find my children. We came to this good land as we do every year at this time, and we pitched our tents and put up our village as always. But the rains came, and they will not stop. The mud is deep wherever we walk, and our fires only smoke and sputter. Water and mud flow into and under and over our tents, and I cannot find my children. The fall of the rain wakes me in the night. The drum of the rain on my tent will not let me sleep again. I lie in my blankets and feel the drip of water onto them. There is water and mud everywhere in my tent. The water and mud have crept into all of my things, and I cannot find my children. The spirits of my people have sunk into the mud. The old Khan mutters into his beard and swears this will be the ruin of his trade. The warlords and their warriors grumble and wipe the mud from their armor and worry that the mud and the wet in the armory has rusted their swords and ruined their arrows. The Magi see the rain and mud and worry about our tents and our wagons and our walls. The cooks and the keepers of the fire say that all the fuel is wet and that water and mud have gotten into the food. Even the goblins in our camp are tired of the mud. And I cannot find my children. Our tents, which once were warm and dry, are now sodden and full of mud. There is mud on the floors, and mud on the walls, and mud in the blankets and in the chests of spare clothes. Water has gotten into everything, even the sealed jars and boxes of precious things. All is wet and soiled with mud, and I cannot find my children. My own person is befouled with mud. I have mud in my hair and in my ears, and my eyes and my nose and mouth. Mud covers me from head to foot. When I can bear it no longer, I leave my tent and stand in the rain. But the rain does not cleanse me. It only spreads the mud around, renewing and replacing it, as I stand in the rain and scream. And I cannot find my children. Darkness falls, not the dark of night, but the blinding haze of madness. My reason has been driven off by the constant rain and the all-pervading mud. I wipe the rain and mud from my eyes, but the fog and the darkness of insanity remain. And I cannot find my children. I am not alone in my madness. From time to time, I see two small figures, sometimes dancing at the edge of sight, sometimes only following me. They stand and watch me, silent in the rain. It is as though some wicked spirit has fashioned the very mud into these two figures, which follow me and stare at me, and sometimes call me mother. And I weep tears of mud, and I scream at the rain, which has driven my mind to see only mud and rain and madness. And I cannot find my children.
"'Tis been some time since I have used such magic to alter my voice. Well, traveler, what think you of this tale?" "Yes, indeed. The children were there the entire time. However, as you no doubt grasped from the theme of the poem, there was so much mud in the camp that the maddened princess could not even recognize her own offspring. Too much mud will do that to a person." "Now then, what is this? I do believe I see a letter carrier coming this way. Are you expecting any correspondence, traveler?" "Well, we shall find out directly, I think. Greetings, O courier."
The blessings of Our Lady of Perpetual Motion be upon you.
"And upon you as well. What brings you out in such weather?"
I seek the one known as the Dragon Merchant.
"I am he. Have you some letter for me, perhaps?"
I do. 'Tis a far-travelled letter, too, from the markings writ upon it. Take it, and may it bring you good news.
"My thanks to you, O courier. Here, a coin to speed you on your rounds."
My thanks to you, O merchant. Good day.
This letter comes from far away indeed. If my memory has not gone astray, and I remember this name aright. An acquaintance of sorts. A seller of books with whom I traveled on occasion some years ago, and in a land far, far beyond your ken. I did her a service once, through a long desert crossing, and saved a friend of hers from a horrible death beneath the sands. It is a story for another time, perhaps. But I wonder what cause she would have to write me. And even more do I wonder how such a letter would have gotten from her to me, considering what gulfs of time and distance lay between us. The letter shall reveal, I think. A moment while I read over this. Well, well. Now that is most interesting. Most interesting indeed. I would share this with you, traveler, if you're willing to hear. Very well. Though I'm not sure that her hand and choice of language would make it easy for you to read. I shall have to give a running translation as I speak. I shall do as before, and speak her words in her voice as I remember it.
Mia voce fare kiel sia voce.
My dear old friend, I hope this letter reaches you, and that you are indeed the dragon merchant that I knew many years ago. In case you do not remember me, I am Orinia Therafine, a bookseller originally from Anessa. Last time I saw you was in Landsong, when you saved my friend's life from a desert creature called the Sand Diver. We were both crossing the desert with Bruno Savan's caravan, but when you continued your travels to the southern cities, I stayed on in Landsong for a while. Many years has passed since then, and in all my travels I never met you again, nor heard a word of you, until I arrived here. How have you fared all this time, and how did you end up in this strange land? I hope you are well, and that we can meet. I find myself stranded here, with no means of returning to any part of the world I am familiar with, if this is even the same world. Since we last saw each other, I have traveled the lands south of the desert and peddled my trade. I have been largely successful, and I have kept up my cooperation with the College of Withera. Over the years I have joined them on several archaeological excavations, mostly as a philologist and occasional riddle solver. The lure of the desert never left me. For the longest time, it was the greatest mystery I had encountered. What happened to that ancient civilization, seemingly so much more powerful than my own? Why did they vanish? Where did they go? We were piecing together small stories of their lives and beliefs, but never anything big. No breakthroughs. They always managed to keep their secrets. The last expedition I joined stranded me here alone. A college mage brought me an ancient relic, newly unearthed from the ruins of another temple-like structure. It was Ravani's notebook that led us to this one as well. I worked with the relic for weeks on end, and when I was not working, it was always in the back of my mind. The object was in appearance like a gigantic war horn, like the horn of some great beast, but none that I had ever seen or heard of. It had several interlocking parts that must at one time have been movable. It also had writing on it, some form of ancient Kalian. but not as old as the Proto-Gallian on the door of the Temple of the Serpent. It is a language I have studied for a long time, but no one knew how it was pronounced. With a few educated guesses, I read the writing out loud and found that parts of it glowed. The parts I pronounced correctly, I assumed back then. And here, in this strange land, that has been confirmed. Through trial and error, I eventually managed to get the entire object to glow. When the last word lit up, I was transported to somewhere else, a strange city with a people and culture completely alien to me, or so it seemed at first. To my great surprise, I could understand the language here, to some degree at least. It is a form of Gallian, but not the ancient forms I have studied. It's a newer form, derived from the one I already knew, and that gave me a great advantage in mastering it. These people might be the descendants of Gallian people from my own world, perhaps a colony established here long ago. Or perhaps it's the other way around. Perhaps the ancient, extinct civilization in our desert might be the offshoot, and this strange place is their ancestral lands. I have lived here for a while now, in the city of Boyahun, where I first arrived with the object still in hand. And although I have traveled a bit in this world, I have mostly stayed right here. This is where you will find me if you decide to look me up. I have made a good living here. I was able to start a small bookseller business here as well, with the few books I had on me when I came here. They are one of a kind in this world, after all, and sold for a small fortune each. The archives and universities of this place have been a treasure trove of information. But nowhere have I found even the smallest hint of any land or city previously known to me. That has led me to believe that this is indeed a different world. Imagine my surprise then, when after all this time, the market gossip described a wandering merchant that sounded very familiar to me. All descriptions of this character led me to believe that it might in fact be my old acquaintance. Although I have settled in this land, and I am content here, I would like the opportunity to go home, or perhaps learn how to travel between worlds by choice. I do not know if you ended up here by accident or intentionally, but either way, I would very much like to meet you and discuss it. I still hold the relic. Perhaps it works both ways, but only one side has legible writing on it. The other side might at one time have contained a magic formula that could have sent me in the other direction, back home. Reading the legible side here seems to have no effect. Perhaps there are more of these objects somewhere. I must admit, the riches I could amass from peddling books between worlds, each one a one-of-a-kind treasure in the other world, have crossed my mind. But most of all, I would like to explore the connection between the two worlds, and the possibility of traveling between them. I will trust that the couriers from the Order of the Lady of Perpetual Motion will be able to find you. They seem to have a certain amount of uncanny powers themselves, as no letter or parcel goes undelivered, even if the recipient's whereabouts are unknown. I look forward to hearing from you. Your old friend, Orinia Therafine.
How very interesting. Oh, it's quite the fascinating story, traveler. I have journeyed to many lands, and many worlds other than this one. Reality stretches well beyond what most people imagine. And in one world, where I dwelt for a time and sold my wares as I traveled, I did meet this bookseller. Let me tell you the tale of my journey with her across the wide oceans of sand.